I'm so delighted today to introduce you to author Jennifer Tempest. Jennifer is the author of The Cardinal War and writes, with no known heir to the empire, four conflicting noble families will use whatever means necessary to claim power for themselves, but only one can become the next ruler. While the nobles fight amongst themselves, some people of the empire struggle to survive. Please welcome author Jennifer Tempest. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thrilled to have you. And four noble families. Are you from a noble family? Is that what inspired it? Or
No, not quite.
not quite. Me neither. So tell me a little bit about the book and how it got started.
So the premise of the book is that the emperor passes away and the four surrounding manors are trying to put their kids on the throne. But in addition to that, we have Eileen, a young thief who gets tossed into the turmoil as well. And it also follows one of the messengers, Stathi. Him and his brother are messengers to the emperor, and he kind of gets himself thrown into the war as well and gets his world tied up with Eileen, and they have to kind of figure out who they are, and especially Eileen goes through a lot of changes.
Oh, fantastic. And tell me something in your regular life, is this the genre that you love to read, to watch? Are you like a, I don't know, a Game of Thrones kind of a person, or is this a one-off that you woke up with this dream and you had to do it?
So I definitely am a fantasy reader. I primarily read fantasy as well as historical fiction, and I do watch fantasy. I have not seen Game of Thrones, surprisingly, but I don't really have a reason why I haven't. But yeah, I surprisingly haven't tackled that one yet. But otherwise, yes, love fantasy.
Yes, well, especially warring families over a dynasty kind of a thing. I thought, oh my goodness, you must have done that. So tell me something, when you're writing fantasy then, are you inspired by things in the world, or is it you just have this overactive imagination and you just dream the whole thing before you start?
I'd say it's a bit of a combination. There's definitely a lot of elements that I take from various things, but a lot of it just comes to me as I write on the paper. Some places I do a lot of traveling, and so some of the setting is like taken from small towns, with the alleyways or just how the cities are laid out, as well as I did a Dungeons and Dragons campaign with my boyfriend. And he introduced the world a little bit, and I took some like tavern elements from that and some various small town cities like that as well.
Wow, very cool. A Dungeons and Dragons person. Who knew? And you're a
It's a lot of
traveler
fun.
too. Where's the favorite place you've ever been?
Definitely Italy, and I'm actually going back there in less than a month. It'd be my second time going, but my boyfriend's first time, so I'm really excited to go back there again.
And where are you going, and where have you been?
So I've been to Florence, Venice, and Rome are the main ones we're going to, and I've been there. Sorrento and Milan, which is the start and the end, are the new places for me.
Oh,
And then a couple little things along the way, but
fantastic. Well, certainly, Italy lends itself to fantasy. That's for sure. I mean, it's like, the pages, the maps, the towns, they're right there on the page. So
yeah,
tell me about your
absolutely.
writing process. I mean, did you know everything that was going to happen, who was going to win in this war of the families, or did you just sit down and it just kind of flowed?
So I'm a bit of a combination when I write. I do a roughly outline of like how I want the ending to be, as well as a few sentences for each chapter that I want to cover. Otherwise, I don't write in any particular order, other than I do tend to write the ending or at least part of the ending first. Then
Ooh.
I'll just write the second chapter, maybe the fifth, and just whatever I'm feeling, if it's more of a dialogue heavy day or maybe a combat heavy day. Or sometimes I just like doing some review. I'll start with where I've read before and just add on to that chapter. So I kind of just do what I feel.
My goodness. Well, tell me about other writing that you've done besides this book.
So I started writing actually when I was in grade 3. We got to write some short fantasy books or short books, and I chose fantasy, of course.
Mhm.
And then since then, I have a full binder up here that I've tons of stories that I've either written, partially written. The Cardinal War was definitely the longest one.
Hmm.
other than the next book, which is so far a little bit longer than the Cardinal War.
Okay. The next book. How ready is that to go? Is it finished? Is it almost finished? Is it?
So it is finished, other than I want to do some edits, of course, but the draft is done. I want to actually get my boyfriend to read it first because after he read the Cardinal War, he had really good insights for me. We had like a 2-hour conversation in the car of what went well, what could be improved on. So I kind of want to get that insight before I do the editing process this time, like the official one.
Yeah, yeah. So the Cardinal War is your first full-length novel.
Yes.
Your
Well, it's technically a novella, but yes.
Okay. So your first rodeo. Tell me something that I love first timers. Was it harder or easier than you thought it was going to be when you started?
I suppose because the reason I put it off so long is just because I was scared of what people would think of the book.
Mm.
And then I just finally decided, no, I just need to do this. The editing process was, I didn't really know what to expect from that because I was worried people would say it sucks, which I really hoped they wouldn't, but because I didn't think it did. But I got really good input back of like what I can expand on or how to improve certain sections without changing my voice in it.
Mm.
And then the cover design, I explained what I wanted and it came out exactly what my vision was.
Wow.
So it actually was a really fun process and I've got to do things like this after. So it's been
Fantastic.
really fun.
And how long from soup to nuts? Did this story germinate for like 10 years in your head before you finally got up the guts to write it down, or and then it poured out in 6 days? Or tell us a little bit about timeline.
So I wrote it in university. So that was about 8 years ago. I was about the same age as Eileen is in the book when I wrote it. And then it was mostly done at that point. But again, I was just kind of scared to do anything with it. So then last year during COVID, I was just kind of like, I don't have a reason not to. So I read it again, added a few things, and then just went for it in about May, June of last year. And then it was published in September.
I love it. A COVID book. There's a
Yeah.
lot of COVID books out there, and that's just amazing how many COVID books there are out there. It's very funny. Years from now, I'll still call them COVID books, and people will think that somebody in the book had COVID, and no, it really is just, they're lockdown books. So this one is done. You said the next one is done. I mean, obviously still edits and stuff. Now, tell me about the process with the two. Did the second one go easier? Was it harder? As compared to the first time?
I think it was easier in the sense that because it's set in the same world. So I had a lot of the baseline there, as well as I had all the input fresh from the edit process, what my friends have said, various things like that. So I was able to take all that input and put it into it.
Hmm.
Harder in the sense I feel there's a little bit more pressure on me now
Oh,
to
yes,
make a
yes.
good book. But yeah.
Yeah, now that you got one good one, people expect big things of you. Now, is the next one, is it like a series? Are they connected? What's the deal?
So it does take place a few years after the Cardinal War. The Cardinal War takes place in Mordale, which is on one side of the empire, and this one takes place in Strongwater, which is on the other side. So it is its own story for the most part. There is one character that will reoccur,
Mhm.
but I'm not going to spoil who.
Okay.
And but yeah, so it's kind of its own story. But this one will be a series of its own because I really like the main character I created. So I'm going to do more about her and her friend.
Okay, terrific. And so you say this one will be a series, meaning this next one will start the series?
Correct.
Or okay, fantastic.
Yeah, but some of it will go back to Mordale, and so there'll be lots of characters from the Cardinal War that will come back as well.
Fantastic. Now, this first one that we're talking about, The Cardinal Sin, is a novella. Is this next one that's being about to be released also a novella?
Most likely. So the Cardinal War ended up being about, after editing, I think it was like 26,000 words or something like that.
Okay.
This one already has hit that point. So I think with editing, it will end up being longer, but I think a novel is technically defined as 50,000, and I don't see it getting to that length
Okay.
with just editing.
Okay.
But
So
I don't want to force it out into a novel length just for the sake of it.
Nope, no
So
reason for
kind
that.
of writing how I feel.
Exactly, exactly. And there are plenty of readers out there that, quite frankly, they see something that's, 120,000 words and they're just like, stop. I mentioned Game of Thrones to you before. The books for Game of Thrones, I mean, you drop that thing on your toe, man, you're doomed. Those books are enormous. So there's a lot of audience for that shorter form. So definitely don't force it to do something it doesn't want to do. That's for sure. Well, that's exciting. When is this next one hopefully going to be ready?
I'm hoping about the same timeline as the last one, so by end of summer. I'm not going to do any of the official editing or anything until I get back from vacation, so it won't be till later May. So after that, I'm going to plug through, and kind of depends how long it takes, but I'm hoping for end of summer or September again.
And who knows, all that time in Italy might inspire a whole different series or way of doing things. We don't know.
Yeah.
Very cool. I'm excited about it. Well, thank you. Our next author, Alexander Davis, is the author of Omeron, The Hero's Chronicle, book number 1. If you could stop all of this, would you? The hero asked. Random knelt before the hero, who was adorned in his blood-stained armor. That armor had once been bright and gleaming, but no longer. Random only lifted his eyes, too weak to stand. He hardly noticed the blood-red snow or the still bodies around them, which he himself would soon join. Of course I would, but it's too late, Random said, before going into a fit of coughing. Once he recovered somewhat, he raised his eyes to meet the hero's gaze. No one can turn back the hands of time. The hero crouched down before Random, still holding his gaze. But what if someone could? Random licked his lips. The blood loss must have been getting to him. He actually considered the question, even though it was impossible. If it were possible, I would sacrifice anything to change this. The hero smiled and held out his hand. That's the right answer. Random hesitated, then reached for that hand. If a murderer was given the choice between death and becoming a hero, something so contrary to everything they know, would they? Even if they did, could they actually change? Could they fight their nature and become a true hero? Please welcome author Alexander R. Davis. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. I'm like right there in that scene already. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I wanted something that would kind of catch for the blurb. I was hoping.
No, I like that.
I just
That's very
threw a scene.
unusual. Yeah, most people don't put like a scene in the blurb, but that was a great choice of a scene.
Thanks. Yeah, that's what I'm going for.
You're going for. Well, first of all, bring me back to our title here. It's Omeron, the Hero's Chronicle, book 1.
Mhm.
So, how many books are there?
At least 3.
Okay.
That's the plan, is 3. We'll see how long it actually takes to get to the end, but that's the plan. 3.
Okay. Now, is anything released but book 1, or anything even written but book 1 yet?
So book 1 is released. Book 2 is in the works. It's not going quite as fast because I'm actually making a board game to go along with the series.
You're making a board game?
Yeah.
Love
It's
that.
a lot of fun.
How do you make a board game? I'm sorry. I should be asking you about the book, but I'm like intrigued. You're my first author.
I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but basically you write a story, you decide how you want fighting to be, and then you get people to test it. People like Jennifer who have 200 games.
Yes, I know. We were just talking before the show about hobbies and such, and Jennifer owns over 200 board games. But I bet, Jennifer, you do not own Alexander's board game.
No, but I would love to play test it. I've done a few play tests and they're a lot of fun to try out new games. And this one sounds really good.
Oh my gosh, you've done play testing? I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's
Just a
like a
couple,
beta
yeah.
reader for a board game.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we've made a connection here on between the covers. You've got a playtester, and not just any. I mean, I could playtest, but Jennifer is obviously a professional.
Yeah.
A professional playtester. That's amazing. Thank you. So you're working on the board game, and then you could work on book 2 after the board game and book 3 and such. Well, tell me about
Yes.
the story. I mean, I love this. I mean, it's obviously a whole moral choice, eternity thing here. What inspired this?
Yeah, so I have always just been fascinated with heroes. I love heroes. And idea kind of really started forming with the huge explosion of heroes with Marvel and everything. And I was thinking a lot about it, and I really wanted to look more at what the person is to be a hero, not just I have a bigger stick or a better superpower, but like I wanted to kind of look at who do you actually have to be a hero. And this book kind of is giving me the chance to do that, even more so because the main character is just objectively a terrible person. That's what they are. So it kind of lets you see what it takes to be a hero, more so the person rather than what power or skills you have. So it kind of looks at the behind the scenes, like what morals do you have to be a hero? If you have these, are you considered a hero? That type of thing is what I was diving into. And then throw in all the action and sprinkle some romance and all that stuff too.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, did you plan this in advance, or was it just like sitting down at the computer one day and saying, heroes, let's talk about heroes, and just started writing? How did that go?
Yeah, I mean, I had thought about heroes a lot, and it pretty much just kind of happened. I was just sitting down writing, and I have a habit of starting a lot of stories. I have so many started stories, but I was sitting there starting all of these different stories, and I was actually, I guess one thing that inspired it a little bit too is I was reading Brandon Sanderson's stuff, his Way of Kings series he's going through. And it has a really interesting thing where it'll say prophecies at the starting of every chapter. And when it was going through that, a lot of them were about heroes. And I'm like, I really like this. This is kind of cool. So then I just sat down and kind of started writing my own thing. And I do a little bit of what he did just because he kind of inspired it. But that's, I couldn't say there was one thing that really sparked it. I love heroes and adventure, and I want to know what a hero is, so I started writing about it.
Wow. Now, for the actual plot and all, were you a person who plotted it out, or you just didn't even know where it was going to go? And even now you're saying, there's 2 books, there's 3, I don't know.
Yeah, I have a really, really hard time outlining things. I can't do it. If I start to outline, the outline just starts getting real detailed, and it just is the book. I just can't. If I sit down and outline, it turns into the book. So, oh, I lost my thing. Oh my goodness. But yeah, I just really, I'm not an outliner. I'm totally, they call it a pantser, right?
Yes, they call it a pantser.
So I'm definitely one of those. I don't outline.
I had an author on who said that there was another term for it instead of a pantser, which is a little bit negative. It was more, they called it an exploratory writer, that they are just exploring as they're going, as opposed to a pantser, which by its name is I'm just flying by the seat of my pants, like everything is just completely accidental. And I had heard a quote that I absolutely adored, that someone who was one of these exploratory writers, a rather famous one, had said that the reason they were is because they felt, at least for themselves, that if they knew where the story was going to go, and if they knew what the characters were going to do and say, then they're not enjoying the writing. They might as well just be taking dictation, or at that point, it's kind of like just, watching the movie that you've seen already. But by being that kind of an exploratory writer or a pantser, shall we say, that they were getting to see the movie for the first time as they were writing, because they didn't really know how things were going to go, and they didn't want to be bored and just kind of take dictation. Is that you, that it's exciting, you're like, I wonder what's going to happen?
I can definitely relate to that. If I can struggle going through the editing because it's like I'm watching it over and over and over. So I can relate to that. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of exciting to not know where it's going. The only thing I really know is the ending. I have an idea of the ending, but I have no idea how to get there.
Now that's funny, because I was just talking to an author client of mine who were about to publish her book, and she even admitted to me on a call, she said, I know I should read it over one more time, but if I read this book one more time, I'm just gonna like throw myself off. Yeah. And
Yep.
I get that. So you could read your book too many times.
Yep. Once you're getting sick of it, you're almost done editing.
Well, it is helpful if you have friends or family or someone who could read and give you feedback. Now, Jennifer mentioned that her boyfriend gave her such great feedback on her first book and really got to the crux of it. Who's giving you feedback on things?
So typically for up until now, like I'm usually in writer groups, or I'll be in like a college writing class, or just somewhere where there's these people who they know writing. So those are kind of the people I outsource to.
Fantastic. It's good to get input, that's for sure. Because left to our own devices, well, all hell could break loose. That's for sure.
Yeah, I pretty much rewrote this entire book because of a bunch of different feedbacks I got. So like it would be a totally different book if not for getting feedback.
Well, good for your friends or colleagues or classmates who were verbal enough to be able to say, because sometimes people read something and they just say, it's not good, but they don't know why. So for them to be able to tell you in such a way that you could take their message and do something with it says a lot about your friends, but it also says a lot about you for being open to it, because a lot of people don't want to hear it.
Yeah, no, I mean, if I was writing a book only for me, then I wouldn't have to listen to anyone else. But I mean, more eyes on something is only able to make it better. Like that's like the main thing is whenever someone gives feedback, or whenever, even if they give criticism, there's been times where it was criticism and I don't think they were trying to be nice, but I found some gold in it. So it's all good. It's just how you look at it. You can look at them being mean, or you can look at, oh, maybe there's something in that.
Absolutely. Well, this is certainly the fantasy hour, because our third author, Anat Eliraz, is the author of Jewels of Smoky Quartz. And Anat writes, she is just an ordinary woman, an emergency room nurse who practices martial arts in her free time. Teleported into a harsh, strange world and sold into slavery to the fighter's ring of Turan, she must use her wit and skills to survive. On the brink of death, she wakes up in a strange room, only to meet one of her captors. Now he acts as her protector. Together they leave the city, but their journey will confront them with their own fears and deepest secrets. And through it all, she finds solace in an old tune, not knowing yet how it will impact her life and the lives of everyone else. Please welcome author Anat Eliraz. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, so thrilled to have you. And what a story. My goodness. Like I'm looking at your cover as I was reading it, and it says, just an ordinary nurse. I'm like, that's not what's on the cover, man. That's for sure. So a bunch of questions for you. Like, why was she a nurse? Are you a nurse?
Well, I'm a physiotherapist,
Okay.
but I've been I've been working with nurses ever since 2005. So we're very close
I get
co-workers.
I get that. And do you have some coworkers that you think feel like they might have been teleported to another place?
To tell you the truth, and it's something that happens to me at least once a week. Once I park the car at the hospital parking lot and I walk into the building, it kind of feels like you're walking into another world. I mean, time moves differently in hospitals. Everything changes. It's not the same. The outside world just doesn't exist. It's not parallel to what's going on inside. So actually just working in a hospital is moving into another world.
Absolutely. No, I totally get that, because I'm certainly not in any medical profession whatsoever. But when I go into a hospital, it feels like another world. That's for sure. And so what inspired this then? You know, what got that germination of this story going?
Well, I've been writing since primary school, all kinds of stories. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons from quite an early age. So yeah, that has its background as well. But actually this story came out from one evening when the question arose about if we have or we don't have free will. And I'm not talking about the religious part of it. I'm talking about how much the community, the family, our education actually causes us to pick or make decisions as we make them. Are we actually doing it out of our true free will, or is it actually being influenced without our knowledge of it? It's like being kind of brainwashed to some degree into picking certain things in life. So that was the question that kind of came into a conversation, and from there it kind of grew into this whole idea of the story.
No, I totally get that. You know, we certainly are the product of everything around us, from birth and upbringing and parents. And, you know, it's a very funny thing that you mentioned that, because on another whole level, I teach marketing in addition to publishing, because obviously they're very well related. And we teach the whole science behind what you buy. And what you buy is completely influenced by your social circle, your television shows that you watch, your family, your neighbors, everything. So if it's influencing everything that you purchase, well, certainly that's free will. And you're absolutely right about that. It's not necessarily, you know, as pure as we might think. Now, how on earth did you come up with, you know, just kind of, were sitting around in a bar one night with friends and just talking philosophically about free will? How does that come up?
I actually don't remember if it came up from something on TV, or was it just something that came up in a conversation, because I was playing with it in my head for a few days. And then what actually happened is that I kind of started having the climax part of the book, the conversation that happens there between the main character and the main antagonist. And that's what that's where the book started, actually. It started with the climax of the book, and that was the conversation that was going on, and everything was built backwards from there.
Wow. That's very cool. And I always love hearing exactly what gave someone that spark for the story, because I don't know if now that you are a published author, if people say to you, I wish I could write a book, but I have no ideas. And ideas are literally everywhere,
Sure.
as you're describing. Now, is this a one and done book, or do these people go on to another volume? Is this going to be a series?
So actually, when I wrote it, it was meant to be a standalone. And you can read it as a standalone. The story that's taking place in book one comes to a conclusion.
Okay.
But I did leave the ending open for an option to get more. Because it's kind of a portal fantasy, and the main character actually moves from Earth into a fantasy world, and most of the story is told from her point of view, then you don't know a lot about the world. You do know there's some kind of magic, but you don't know how it works. You do know there are other races, but you still don't know exactly how the politics and how the nations, whatever, you don't get everything because she doesn't know these things yet.
Gotcha.
So I actually had more ideas about it, and that's what's going to get expanded in the sequel, in the second book. But right now, as I see it, it's going to be just 2 books. It's going to come into a final ending by the end of book 2.
Well, I always abide by the fact that when we're on the show, we never discuss anything that happens after page 30, because we don't want to give anything away. But even announcing that there are going to be more books in the series, well, I mean, it's still, you can still kill everybody off in this book, and it just happens to be in the same world. I mean, that does happen. So I love this, that we have 3 very different views on the fantasy world here, and we also have some dates that are getting made here afterwards, because Anat, you have another Dungeons and Dragon fan over here. We've got board games going on. We need to have like a little writer's retreat, the 3 of us, and have a party, that's for sure. And I think if we're trying to get anybody to explore their own writing, these are some great ideas for getting started. D&D, board games. But I would love for you to think about, what else would you tell someone? I always say, so many people who watch our show want to write, and you 3 pretty much represent success. So Jennifer, I'll start with you. If you knew somebody, and I'm sure you have many friends now, because they say that 90% of the population wants to write a book. 90% means pretty much everybody you know is jealous of you right now because you wrote a book. So what are your words of wisdom, motivational speech? What are you going to tell them to do to get started?
There's usually 2 things that come to mind with that. One is, don't let fear stop you, because it stopped me for like 6-7 years, and I've loved the journey so far. And maybe I wasn't ready for it then, but I took the plunge, and just don't let the fear of not knowing what's going to happen stop you from enjoying what is happening. And with that, kind of with the idea thing you said, is just write what you love. I know there's always conflict of like people talking about don't write about tropes, or there's always things that come along with that. But to me, it's just write what you enjoy writing. Things will come together, and there will be people that enjoy your book.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Alexander, what are you going to tell all of our newbies?
It's a hard question because there's so many things. Well, I'd just like second what Jennifer said. What you're passionate about, you're going to be such a better writer in. If you actually care about the topic, it'll be better. So that would definitely, I would second that. And 2 other things that come to mind. One is maybe try writing with a friend. I've never finished a book with a friend, but lots of times I'll like kind of start writing with a friend just to open up the possibilities, you know? So that can be something, and you're kind of like, you have an accountability partner, you could say. So that's always a good thing. And another one is spend time around kids because they have amazing imaginations. And half the time they're playing these games that could easily be movies and books.
That's a great tip to spend time with kids because kids also have no fear, which very often we don't like to do things because we're afraid of what everyone will think about it. But they also have hyperactive imaginations. And I definitely want to spin off of your write with a friend. Whether or not you're writing a book, I love that you each seem to have people who are accountability people, who are reading. That is so huge, to be with people who, you can swap manuscripts, or at least somebody who's going to call you up and say, hey, weren't you supposed to release a book last month? When's it coming out? What's going on over there? Something
Yeah.
great. Anat, how about you? What would you say to that new writer who's asking for advice?
So what I would say, first of all, is just write, because it's not about publishing it. Deciding to write doesn't come from, I want to publish a book, so I should write. It should be, I want to write, maybe someday it will be published. For me personally, I wrote the book and I haven't thought about publishing it for over a year after it was finished. But in general, I wrote because I had a story to write. I had something that interested me and I wanted to put it down in words. And if someone thinks they have a story, they should just write it. It doesn't matter right now how good it is, if somebody else would want to write it, even if you're writing it for yourself. I think there's something therapeutic about writing, because you can put your characters through situations that you're trying to deal with and then see what solutions they can come up with. Yes, it's your solutions, but they have to deal with it. So you're not actually making the mistakes they might make. And, or as someone before me said, you can take people that you're right now hating very much and put them into the bad guys and kill them off and solve the problem. So of course in a joke way, but it's still something fun, something that you should do for yourself, even if you're not going to ever put it into publishing. And I can say, if you brought it up, that this morning, because sorry, here it's almost midnight, but but this morning I got a message from a friend who's I'm in contact with him for about 2 years or so. He contacted me when I was at the process of publishing my book. And he told me that he had a story he started writing many years ago and he didn't know what to do with it. And we just started talking and I started kind of helping him, basic editing, I'm not professional in it, but just giving him some feedbacks and stuff like that. And he just wrote me this morning that he closed the deal with a publisher here. So yeah. So maybe it works, even if it's not 90%, but even one is
Absolutely. Well, I do love what you said about don't think that writing and publishing are the same thing, that they are two different things. And I love that. I'm constantly reading how we kind of as a society are very, very transactional, even in our pleasurable things, that we always think, if I started knitting blankets or something just for fun, that somebody will probably come up to me and say, you could sell those on Etsy, or you could have a side gig doing this or that. Like, everybody thinks that our end goal always has to be to be like the pro in whatever we do. And I'm so glad that you said that about writing. Writing is such a pure form of artistic expression. It's personal. It's dumping your heart on a computer screen, on a page. And sometimes, yes, the goal of it is that we get it published and share it with the world, but not always. Not always. And I think I really appreciate you kind of splitting those two things, the act of writing and the act of publishing, because not everything that you write can and should be published. Some of it should be kind of kept just for you, and not shared with the rest of the world. But since you three have published, and we're so thrilled about that, and one of the things, of course, I want to do is remind our viewers of your books and where to find them and where to find you. But tell me a little bit about who should be reading your book, what type of person. So if I were shopping right now and I have a laundry list of people, who on my list should I buy your book for? And if I was going to put that book into like a gift basket or something with another object, because sometimes you want to give someone a book and another object. So I saw two people look up like, gotta think about what that other object is. Alexander, let's start with you then. Let's
Start with me.
Yes. I saw the wheels turning. So Alexander's the author of Omeron, the Hero's Chronicle, Book 1. So first off, tell me who I should be buying this book for. Who on my list is this the perfect book for? So kind of describe your target reader, and then you're going to tell us what you should put into the box.
So I'd probably, if you're a person who, it'd probably be two things. A person who likes epic fantasy and swordplay, that type of thing, and probably people who just are in love with heroes.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's a very specific group, but
well, let me ask you a little further than that. And this doesn't mean, and I always tell people when we're talking target market, that it doesn't mean that other people cannot buy your book. But in general, do you find that those types of people are, men or women or a certain age bracket, or also interested in X, Y, or Z, something like that?
I mean, the most people who have read it are probably like younger than 30.
Okay.
But I have got like a couple 70-year-olds who also said it was good. So,
Okay.
But typically it's like between 18 and 30, I think, are usually who read it.
Okay, terrific. And when I buy a copy of Omeron to give to the fantasy loving young reader in my life, what else am I going to put in the bag with it?
We always got to have sweets. Throw in some sweets with it. You can snack while you read.
I like that. I'm all about the sweets while I'm eating. That's fabulous. Okay, so Anat, tell us about the Jewels of Smoky Quartz. Who should I be buying this book for? And what is going into the gift bag or basket with the book?
So Jewels of Smoky Quartz is, first of all, an adult book. I mean, 18 plus is what I usually recommend it. Not because there are any, there's no rape or anything of the sort, but there are scenes that I think, well, I will not take the responsibility for younger readers to read. I have teenage daughters. They know most of the story, but they still didn't read it as a full book. And I'm waiting till they grow up a little more. So anybody 18 and up. What else is that readers that like to be active in the story. What I mean by that is that the book is written with all kinds of word games, and there are some twists in the plot. So there are all kinds of clues that are strewn along the story. And you might read something and then say, she mentioned something like that before. I wonder if it has some meaning, or this has gone on like, or what are these letters meaning, or and so on and so on. And some things will come like half a page later, and you'll say, oh, cool, nice. Some things will be like a chapter later or closer to the climax of the book, where everything will come to some conclusion. So some readers might pick up on the clues and then they can pat themselves on the back and say, yeah, we got that one. Or they will go back and look for the page where it said that something was actually there and say, oh, we missed it. So it kind of becomes a mini game. It's not like, you know, the books that, okay, if you think you want to walk through this door, move to page X. If you were going back in the tunnel, no, it's not that kind of book. But you're getting a story and you have some active part in it. And it's not like you're just being fed a story from start to finish. So people who enjoy being more active in the reading process, I think can enjoy this book more.
Fantastic. And what's going in the bag?
Yeah, that's what I was going. Alexander kind of took it. I was going to say like a big, a big chocolate ice cream. And it was just because I had this fun exercise we were doing in some writers group that we were supposed to interview our main character or any character we wanted to from the book. And I interviewed my main character, and at some point she was going like, can I have some ice cream? And it's just a kind of a funny thing for me too. I said, yeah, I think this book could go really well with a jar of ice cream.
Goes well with ice cream. Okay. And Jennifer is the author of The Cardinal War. What type of reader would this most appeal to? And are you two giving away snacks, or are you going for, should they get a blanket? Should they get a scented candle? Should they get their own set of wings? What are they getting?
So my book is definitely marketed more towards young adults, not just because it is a generally shorter one, but also just because it is a little bit more lighthearted for the most part. And it's nice. It's a book that engages you quickly, and you kind of just, I've been told people just kind of power through it because they want to find out the ending. And it doesn't have, like, there is some romance and that sort of thing, but nothing goes too heavy into anything. I certainly have a lot of adult friends, like over teenage years, that have read it and enjoyed it, but it is directed more towards the young adults. And my first thought actually was a candle for what's going to go in the box, partly because, as you can see by the cover, there is it's stormy, and quite a few times, including the very first chapter of the book, takes place in a storm. So the storm element comes up, which is when you would have candles typically, and there is a spot in the middle in like a mini climax scene, sort of, where a candle is kind of significant, or at least important in the scene.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I'm glad that somebody was doing something other than candy and ice cream. It's very funny because when I ask that question, sometimes people have something in mind. Like Anat, I wasn't sure if you were going to actually mention the Smoky Quartz and maybe pairing your book with some actual stones or something. So I've had people say that. Some are just given a warm blanket because it's that kind of a snuggle down and read the book kind of a thing. Well, you three are fabulous, and I'm so glad to hear that there are some pots in the fire at different stages with all three of you. So I definitely want you to come back when those new books come out. But for our viewers, Jennifer Tempest, The Cardinal War, you'll definitely want to grab a copy of that. Alexander Davis, the author of Omeron, The Hero's Chronicle, Book 1. So we know he's being held to the fact that there are more because he flat out put that in the title. Jennifer also mentioned that there's another one coming. So we want to be aware of that. And Anat Eliraz is the author of The Jewels of Smoky Quartz. So if you are a fantasy reader, or maybe you're not one yet, but you haven't quite tried it, we have 3 very, very appealing books and authors. So thank you so much for joining me between the covers.
For having us.
Thanks for joining us on Between the Covers. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're an author who would be interested in appearing on our show, or perhaps you're a member of a book club, we do host book clubs as well, please visit betweenthecoverstv.com. By the way, at betweenthecoverstv.com, you can watch past episodes in addition to learning more about our authors and guests. So sign up there if you would like to be a guest on the show yourself. And if you have some books that you would like to get written or published, visit redpenguinbooks.com. Thanks so much for joining us.